It's very hard, and especially someone like Bon, who's more like he's more like someone in your family, but like more like, I mean, we've seen more of him than what his family ever did.
At 70, Angus Young candidly shares about the bands he hated and ignored the most during his career. From blunt criticism of the Ramones and the punk movement to harsh comments on Deep Purple and the Rolling Stones, Angus's views will surely surprise many people. Are you curious to know why one of the greatest rock artists has such thoughts? Let's explore now to understand more about Angus Young's unique perspective. But first, what led to his unique and sometimes controversial outlook? Let's take a look at the influences and early experiences that shaped the AC/DC legend's unique musical taste. The roots of Angus Young's musical taste, the great guitarist who was responsible for shaping the distinctive sound of AC/DC, honed his musical senses through a mix of practicing his instincts and studying them consciously. Angus Young, in contrast to many of his contemporaries, approached music with rigorous standards. These standards would come to define his career and ultimately determine his opinions, which were sometimes contentious regarding other musicians throughout the 1970s and other decades. The principles of rock and roll were taught to Angus Young by the pioneers of the genre before he became a global icon with his schoolboy outfit and recognizable stage presence. The uncomplicated, guitar-driven approach that was prevalent in early rock became the basis upon which he constructed his unique sound. Additionally, the proficient rhythm guitar playing of his brother Malcolm served as the ideal counterpoint to his vivacious performance. When he was a young musician in Australia, he was attracted to musicians who provided rock and roll that was straightforward and unadorned, as opposed to those who embraced excessive sophistication or studio trickery during their performances. Particularly noteworthy is the fact that his playing technique demonstrates a connection to the blues-based rock traditions that came before the progressive and punk groups that he would later condemn with such vehemence. Technical expertise was not something that Angus Young considered to be optional. Rather, it was what he considered to be the most important aspect of music. The primary reason for his disapproval of bands such as the Ramones was that he believed they lacked the ability to perform musically. In contrast to his criticism of musicians who were technically restricted, he developed his playing by practicing a great deal and paying close attention to the many aspects of his performance. It is because of this emphasis on technique that he was able to justify his harsh criticism of Eric Clapton, which he described as sticking licks together that he has taken from other people. His musical theory holds that real uniqueness must be accompanied by technical perfection in order to be considered complete. This dedication to musicianship was reflected by his performances, which were distinguished by a guitar technique that was both precise and aggressive. Despite the fact that Young is famous for his theatrical stage antics, he never considered performance to be separate from musical substance. As an alternative, he believed that dynamic stage presence was something that should be a natural consequence of musical aptitude rather than something that should be compensated for when it was lacking. The fact that he referred to Deep Purple as a poor man's Led Zeppelin was a reflection of his conviction that copying without similar competence was not deserving of respect. Young remained committed to this unadulterated approach to rock and roll throughout the entirety of AC/DC's existence. Continuously, he disapproved of some musical fads that put an emphasis on appearance or concept rather than performing talent. On the other hand, his performances established that technical expertise and showmanship were not mutually exclusive and could coexist without any sacrifice. This equilibrium became the defining characteristic of his approach to music, which was impeccable in terms of both its execution and its entertainment value. From his deep musical experiences and interests formed during his youth, Angus Young developed a distinct taste in rock music, while also not hesitating to express strong opposition to some other styles and bands. So which bands did Angus Young find unacceptable and even hate? Can you guess who they were? Now let's find out. The band Angus Young hates the most. Punk rock was a musical movement that developed in the middle of the 1970s, and Angus Young was a vocal opponent of what many people perceived to be a revolution in the music industry. During his career, he was critical of a number of bands. Nevertheless, none of them were treated with greater disdain than the Ramones. He considered them to be musically unskilled and artistically irrelevant. During the middle of the 1970s, AC/DC began to tour Europe more often, and Young had the opportunity to experience the blossoming punk culture firsthand. His evaluation was prompt and unambiguous. "They're not punk, they're just shite," he said to Double J about the bands that he saw performing in England. The Ramones, who had become the pioneers of punk music in the United States and had emerged from the CBGB environment in New York, were notably targeted by this scathing criticism. Punk music's political agenda, which Young believed to be incompatible with his simple rock sensibility, was a contributing factor in Young's antipathy against punk music from the beginning. Chuck Berry and Berry songs that were about automobiles, ladies, and party time were some of my favorites. "This was what we considered to be rock and roll," he explained. Subsequently, he revealed, "The very first time I heard the word anarchy, I had to get a dictionary to look up the fucking word. That wasn't conveying any information to me since I had a restricted education, which is what I mean by limited." Young, on the other hand, could not find anything original in the purported insurrection of punk. He thought that punk bands were little more than imitations of well-known performers, saying, "You've got the Ramones and all that. All of them are attempting to pull off a Small Faces impression." He made a specific reference to the shenanigans that Steve Marriott would engage in when performing on stage. He said, "I don't know if you remember when Steve Marriott used to come on and wipe his nose and spit in his hand, generally B&Rs, pour beer over the crowd, and the whole thing like that." The Ramones were seen to have a lack of musical aptitude, which was the primary focus of Young's most scathing critique. "The Ramones, I only heard them once. I heard a song, and it got no results," the speaker said. "It was the first band I had ever been a part of, and I'm sure even that was better than what I was doing at the time, which was when I was 12 years old." Young argued that technical proficiency remained crucial to rock's validity, in contrast to punk's embracing of musical simplicity as a virtue. He said, "They can do all that. Even if it is very simple for a man to get up there and accomplish all of that, they are unable to play soccer." Not only stopping at a few names, Angus Young also openly criticized many other bands in the rock music scene, showing his sharp views and unique musical personality. So besides the band he hates the most, what other groups are in Angus's sights? Other bands he openly criticized. In addition to his obvious disdain for the Ramones, Angus Young was not afraid to extend his critical gaze to many of the major icons of 1970s rock music. His unabashed comments caused a stir in the music industry as he openly questioned the authenticity and true creativity of some of the artists considered legendary. Although Led Zeppelin is universally regarded as one of the greatest rock bands in history, Young was not impressed by their live performances. In a 1977 interview with Classic Rock magazine, he revealed that he had witnessed a 3-hour Led Zeppelin concert, but the audience was bored for 2.5 hours. In particular, Angus was annoyed that the band ended up having to play old rock and roll songs to get the crowd going, which he called disgusting because they were considered the most exciting rock and roll band in the world. This view of Angus highlighted the clear difference between him and many fans and music critics at the time. Young also expressed deep disappointment with the Rolling Stones, a band that was considered an icon of rock. He accused the Rolling Stones of abandoning their rock and roll roots in favor of music, which he felt did not belong to true rock. In blunt terms, he said, "Let the best people, the black people, do that." Angus's assessment goes further, pointing out that the Rolling Stones' decline began with the release of songs like Jumpin' Jack Flash and Street Fighting Man, songs that he sees as the beginning of their creative and formative decline. Angus Young's harshest comments were probably reserved for Deep Purple. He once recalled paying to see them live, but found the experience ridiculous. He was blunt, stating, "I never liked Deep Purple or anything like them. I always hated them." This hostility reached a boiling point when Deep Purple's crew were accused of deliberately sabotaging an AC/DC performance. Angus did not hesitate to call Deep Purple the poor man's Led Zeppelin, a sharp jab at their style and class compared to the legendary band. Young also criticized progressive rock bands like Yes, who were so boring that they could not get the audience to dance or get excited. Angus even joked that the only way to save the boredom was to have some Sheila's stripping, a reference to attractive girls at their shows, which clearly showed his lack of respect for the genre. Finally, with Eric Clapton, one of the most respected guitar legends, Young did not hesitate to express his disdain, saying that Clapton had nothing original to offer. He accused Clapton of simply cobbling together pieces of music he had learned from blues masters like B.B. King in a disjointed and incoherent way. Angus even declared that, even on a bad night, Chuck Berry plays much better than Clapton. A controversial remark that reflects his unique and strong-willed views on music and his fellow artists. In short, Angus Young's uncompromising attitude and sharp criticism reflected not only his strictness in judging music, but also his deep belief in the original values of rock and roll that he held dear and defended throughout his career. After hearing Angus Young openly criticize a series of famous bands such as Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, Deep Purple, and Eric Clapton, has his sharp and steadfast viewpoint ever changed over time? Have you ever reconsidered or adjusted your views on these musical colleagues? Did his views ever change? It would appear that Angus Young's harsh and vocal evaluations of his fellow rock artists from the 1970s have become more lenient with time. His relationships with many of the artists he once disliked developed toward reconciliation and even friendship over the years, demonstrating a depth and sophistication in Young's views that went beyond his harsh statements on stage and in the press. Although the talented guitarist had previously been critical of many of the major bands and musical icons of his day, his relationships with other artists have developed toward reconciliation and even friendship. The collaboration between AC/DC and the Rolling Stones is one of the most illustrative examples of this shift in the music industry. AC/DC had agreed to open for several of the Rolling Stones' performances on their big tour by the year 2003. Even though Angus Young had previously lambasted the Rolling Stones for gravitating towards soul music and forsaking their rock and roll heritage, Angus Young and his brother Malcolm Young ascended the stage together at the Hockenheim stage in Germany to sing Chuck Berry's Rock Me Baby with the Rolling Stones. This performance went down in history as a significant moment. The fact that this moment occurred was not only a rare musical occasion, but it also demonstrated that earlier personal problems had been resolved through reconciliation and mutual respect. Not only that, but Angus also disclosed a heartwarming facet of his connection with the Rolling Stones, when, in the period following the passing of his brother Malcolm Young in 2017, he frequently played the album Blue and Lonesome. It was a blues cover album by the Rolling Stones for Malcolm to listen to. This gesture demonstrated that Angus still had a profound regard for them in terms of the music and creative worth that they possessed, despite the controversy and criticism that they had received. Many of Angus Young's interactions with his fellow rock artists were warm and intimate, despite the fact that he made public pronouncements about everything. During his time with AC/DC, Keith Richards, the iconic guitarist for the Rolling Stones, became a personal friend and a fervent supporter of the band. Richards once voiced his admiration for the Young brothers' synergy on the guitar, saying, "Being a guitarist is one thing, but being a guitarist with another guitarist is even more wonderful. Instead of 2 guitars, there are 5, 6, and 10 of them." The praise demonstrated a profound comprehension and respect for the one-of-a-kind skill and coordination that AC/DC have. Young eventually became good friends with David Coverdale, the former leader of Deep Purple. Angus Young famously referred to Coverdale as the poor man's Led Zeppelin, which is an obvious irony. Coverdale was a member of Deep Purple. As they became older, he revealed that they frequently laughed at those old comments, which demonstrated that they had developed a deeper understanding of one another and a more open attitude toward one another. Additionally, Angus Young and Eddie Van Halen shared a mutual regard for one another in their business partnership. At the Monsters of Rock Festival in 1984, the two great guitarists had their first encounter with one another. Their appreciation for Van Halen's skill and ingenuity was clear in future encounters, despite the fact that Young had previously regarded Van Halen to be more of a pop band. Malcolm Young, the brother of AC/DC and one of the band's co-founders, previously expressed his thoughts on criticisms leveled against the band's musical style, saying, "They say we sound the same because we come from the same band. That summarizes us." This idea not only exemplifies the artistic integrity of AC/DC, but it also explains why Angus Young has been able to endure severe criticism without losing his individuality. Not only has this integrity resulted in the preservation of AC/DC's sound, but it has also been important in the band's ability to preserve their legendary standing in the rock world. However, it was only after the accumulation of years of experience and maturity that Angus came to the realization that the harsh criticism he had received in the past was only a part of the process of artistic development. Rebuilding connections, making amends with previous adversaries, and expanding his view on music and his contemporaries are all things that he has not been afraid to do over time. What do you think of Angus Young's change of heart about the bands he once so harshly criticized? Does the subsequent reconciliation and respect make you reconsider the conflicts in rock music? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more interesting updates.